Orleans.
This program is available in either the VHS or DVD formats.
We are PBS. Funding for local broadcast of Nightly Business Report has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Key. With financial professionals and a wide array of resources, Key develops customized solutions to help customers maximize their wealth.
OPB invites you to Art in the Pearl Festival, Labor Day weekend, September 3 through 5. This free event showcases the work of more than 100 artists and offers a world music stage, hands-on art activities for all, and great food. Call 503-722-9017 or check the link at opb.org for information.
Coming up on this episode of Antiques Roadshow FYI, famous Hollywood costumes, plus American Fancy, and the search for a googly-eyed doll. It's Antiques Roadshow FYI.
Join us tonight at 8 here on OPB.
Another opening.
It's another opening for one of Broadway's best shows.
Kiss Me Kate.
Kiss Me Kate. Cole Porter's intoxicating mix of musical comedy and Shakespeare's Shrew.
I hate men.
It's too darn hot when the acclaimed revival of Kiss Me Kate comes to great performances.
Join us tonight at 8:30 here on OPB.
This week, it's fewer favorites on Oregon Art Beat. Growing up in war-torn Vietnam, Minh Tram knew he wanted to be a dancer. He held on to that dream when he escaped to the U.S. He now mixes modern and Asian dance in his choreography. Donna Joes has a job as a nurse practitioner, but she says music is something she just has to do. And we think you'll agree, the songs she writes are wonderful.
Thursday night at 8 here on OPB.
Find out what the world is talking about and why. I'm Fareed Zakaria. Join me each week for the new International Affairs series, Foreign Exchange, here on OPB.
Friday night at 8:30 here on OPB. Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Stein Oil Company, fueling for businesses in Clackamas, Oregon City, Milwaukee, and Tualatin.
Oregon Hematology Oncology, a locally owned practice, providing personalized cancer care in an environment of compassion and support for over a quarter century.
Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, a Pacific Northwest law firm with offices in Oregon and Washington. Legal advisors for the future of your business.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Wednesday, then extended coverage of the continuing efforts to come to grips with the deaths and the destructions of Hurricane Katrina, and the latest on the human stampede in Baghdad that killed at least 700 people.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Somewhere west of Topeka, someone's getting out for a breath of fresh air, which is why a farmer is harvesting corn, and why a train is transporting corn, and why ADM is turning corn into ethanol, a renewable, cleaner-burning fuel. Somewhere west of Topeka, someone's getting out for a breath of fresh air, and lots of us are helping make sure that fresh air is actually fresh. ADM, resourceful by nature.
David and Kathy just built a beautiful new home right at the water's edge.
I'll tell you the real story. I've been a professor at a local university since I was 28, and my husband's been at it longer than I have. You don't build a big nest egg on a couple of teacher salaries. You need a plan and a financial consultant who isn't afraid to roll up his sleeves.
Smith Barney. This is who we are. This is how we earn it.
And by CIT and Pacific Life.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The crisis in New Orleans grew more desperate today. Mayor Ray Nagin announced Hurricane Katrina killed hundreds of people, possibly thousands. He warned bodies could trigger outbreaks of disease. Water finally stopped surging through breached levees today, but the city remained flooded. Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco appealed for help to stop looting and to help survivors.
We believe that we need to free up the National Guard, essentially to do security in the city. And I'm asking for military presence to do all of the, help us with the evacuation, to take charge of the evacuation and do all of the other things that our people have been doing.
Officials in Mississippi reported at least 110 people killed there. The worst of the storm blasted the Biloxi and Gulfport areas and left little intact along their coastlines. Across the Gulf region, at least 70,000 people were in shelters. Federal officials said some may never be able to return. Disaster relief efforts moved into higher gear today. 21,000 National Guard troops were mobilized, and the U.S. Navy dispatched a hospital ship, helicopter carriers, and supplies. President Bush flew over the damaged zone on his way back to Washington from Texas. He spoke later in the Rose Garden at the White House.
The folks on the Gulf Coast are going to need the help of this country for a long time. This is going to be a difficult road. The challenges that we face on the ground are unprecedented. But there's no doubt in my mind we're going to succeed. Right now, the days seem awfully dark for those affected. I understand that. But I'm confident that with time, you get your life back in order, new communities will flourish, the great city of New Orleans will be back on its feet, and America will be a stronger place for it.
The president also urged all Americans to help by contributing to the Red Cross. We'll have much more on the hurricane's aftermath and the response right after this news summary. The hurricane cut oil output in the Gulf by 95%. So today, the Energy Department opened the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to make up the shortfall. In response, oil futures in New York dropped nearly 90 cents to settle under $69 a barrel. But the refinery shutdowns along the Gulf fueled gasoline prices. They spiked 30 to 50 cents overnight across the country. We'll have more on the energy part of this story later in the program. Wall Street had a hurricane rally today. Investors bought oil company stocks and shares in companies that could help rebuild the Gulf Coast. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained more than 68 points to close at 10,481. The Nasdaq rose 22 points to close at 2152. Hundreds of Iraqis were killed in a stampede in Baghdad today. The health ministry said 769 died, most of them women and children. More than 300 others were hurt. It happened as thousands of Shiites were crossing a bridge in a religious ceremony. Rumors of a suicide bomber in the crowd ignited panic, and the victims were trampled or jumped into the Tigris River and drowned. We'll have more on this story later in the program. Back in this country, the Food and Drug Administration approved a new flu vaccine today made by GlaxoSmithKline. The company will be the country's third major supplier. There were only 2 last year, and one had to stop production over contamination fears. A top FDA official resigned today in a dispute over emergency contraception. Susan Wood had been director for women's health. She criticized the agency for not allowing sales of the morning after pill without a prescription. The FDA said last week it could not decide how to enforce an age limit for such sales. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the tragedies along the U.S. Gulf Coast and across a bridge in Baghdad. The terrible stories of Hurricane Katrina continue. Spencer Michaels begins our coverage with this report on the day's developments.
While officials assessed the damage and attempted to relieve the misery, the people of New Orleans tried to cope with an unprecedented disaster. With water pouring into city streets through 2 levee breaks and 80% of the city underwater, the mayor said he had no choice but to order the total evacuation of the city. He added that New Orleans won't be functional for 2 or 3 months. Attempts to plug the breaches with sandbags have thus far failed. The risk of disease is growing as officials confirmed bodies are floating in the water around the city. So today, refugees awaited help. There are as many as 1 million homeless people across the region.
I got to keep a strong front in front of my children, and if I panic, then they're going to panic. As long as I have my family, everybody else is all right, and we're very grateful.
Coast Guard teams continued rescue operations by helicopter, plucking people huddled on rooftops. Hundreds remained stranded on rooftops and balconies, frantically waving and holding signs, calling for help, hoping for rescue. This woman had to decide which of her family members to leave behind because the police rescuing the family had limited space.
I was trying to send the baby and my daughter with the police officer because the baby have a respiratory problem. But I'm looking at my other daughter with her 3 kids and my brother standing there, and it's like I want to be there with them because I feel like when my daughter had a chance to go with the policeman, it would have been a good choice. But to leave my brother and my grandkids and my other daughter, it's like I couldn't do it. But my baby girl with the baby, she was screaming it out and saying, "Mom, if you don't come, I'm gonna kill myself. You got to come with me." You know, so my daughter told me, she said, "Mom, take my daughter, take Lexus," and she said, "Go."
Many residents didn't evacuate because they didn't have cars, money for gas, or anywhere to go. A quarter of New Orleans residents live below the poverty level.
It's just a thing that always happens. The one that have the least seem like they're hit harder than anything else.
Other residents made the conscious decision to weather the storm.
I work for the sheriff in Orleans Parish, and I was afraid, if the water wasn't high, I'd have to go to work. So we decided to ride it out. And it was a bad mistake.
This man was looking ahead to rebuilding, but he has no insurance.
Don't nobody give me any kind of assistance. I'm just going to have to try to do it piece by piece, wood by wood, paycheck by paycheck.
Looters roamed the streets, particularly in the French Quarter, which sits on higher ground and wasn't flooded as badly as the rest of the city.
It was a disaster. People were shooting right across the street from me.
They were shooting guns?
They were shooting at each other. They were saying that they didn't care about life anymore. And it was just disastrous. It was rioting. They had a building burning down, a pawn shop where they had set it afire. And people were just looting, and it's like a movie to me. I still haven't woke up. I feel like I'm in a dream or something.
Others wandered the flooded streets desperately looking for basic supplies, water, food, shelter, and gasoline. There's no electricity and no running water, and many communication systems remain down. Inmates from a jail were moved out of their flooded cells and onto exit ramps of nearby highways as guards stood by with guns. Not far away, the Superdome, where tens of thousands sought shelter, was surrounded by at least 8 feet of water. Thousands more refugees sat outside the Superdome waiting for shelter. Texas Governor Rick Perry and his response team today explained they'd shelter the 23,000 refugees at Houston's Astrodome, transferring them in a bus caravan.
The Astrodome is a county facility. We have worked closely and have contingency plans to use the dome as a emergency disaster recovery and refuge center in the event of a storm here in Houston. We are implementing those plans today for New Orleans. The dome is not suited well for this kind of a crowd for a long term. The problem when you put 20 or 30,000 people in a single place, you have problems of privacy, you have problems of just social issues, psychological problems when you put those people in that kind of an environment. We are also dealing with people who have been without food, without water, without sanitary sewer, without the ability to take a shower for 3 or 4 days. They're not happy when they come here, and we are cognizant of that. We will provide a place for as long as is necessary, but are working closely with FEMA, with the governor's emergency management officials, to try to move them through the dome to other facilities where they would be better suited for the longer term.
Army National Guard troops continued arriving on the scene to assist and keep law and order. And 4 Navy ships left from Norfolk, Virginia today to join the relief effort.
That case of water may be the case of water that makes it to one of my family members. And, you know, just knowing that I had a small part in that is going to be, you know, good for me, just knowing in some way I helped.
32 miles northeast of New Orleans, this is all that remains of the town of Slidell.
It's gone. It's total disaster. Nothing left. We lost everything. We just didn't think it would be that bad. But inside our home, the water was up to here.
Interstate 10 used to go through Slidell, but now it looks like a jigsaw puzzle. Katrina tore out the bridge leading into the town of 25,000. This house was cut in half by a fallen tree. Jim Day was sitting in his garage when the tree came through the roof.
Crash bang. I dove out of the car into the house.
Where was your heart?
It was still in the car.
Next door in Mississippi, Gulfport today lies a city in ruins. Residents stood in line for ice as military police patrolled the streets. In Biloxi, casinos and homes up and down the coast were flattened by the 30-foot storm surge.
There's not a word to describe it. Wondering how long it's going to take for things to get back to normal. Power, water, food, gas, stores destroyed, gas stations destroyed, homes destroyed, loss of life. It's just, there's no question in my mind if there's ever a storm, you know, approaching, next time we're going to leave the area. And we won't worry about trying to get back because a lot of times there's not, as you can see, there's not much to come back to.
We raised 7 children here. My wife and I are 73 and 74. And yesterday, this hurricane wiped us clean. Every one of my children lost everything they had.
This property right here has been in the family. This was my uncle's house right here. This was my grandmother's house. This was my pawn shop over here. And I also had a jet ski rental business out of it. There's a house right back in the back over here that you can't quite see it, but it's my aunt's house, and it's totaled. These are just gone completely. And, you know, we have a pretty long history here on the corner, and it's all gone. It's just, it's devastating. It looks like someone nuked the place. It's just, I'm an emotional mess. I mean, I can't deal with it.
Late today in New Orleans, one ray of hope amid what officials are calling an impossible situation. Water stopped rising as the levels between the city and Lake Pontchartrain equalized. And in some places, the water appeared to be dropping slightly. But New Orleans is far from out of the woods.
Kemi Nezaram of Independent Television News is in Biloxi, Mississippi. He spent the day surveying the damage with residents of the area.
Are totally devastated and gone. These were businesses that used to exist before the Hurricane Katrina.
Paul is looking for his friend. His bar used to be on the beach here, but now it's gone.
I was working in this bar the night before the hurricane came through.
But I mean, it's gone. There's nothing left.
There's absolutely nothing left, except for the sign. It's no longer here, and I no longer have a job.
Gulfport, Biloxi's 27-mile man-made beach is, quite frankly, no more. Hurricane Katrina leveling the town and also social barriers. $1-million mansions and shacks alike, the storm did not discriminate. And amid the wreckage, heartfelt reunions.
The reason I'm still here is because of that.
That protected you, that big building behind you.
That protected me.
The tower block. If that wasn't there, you'd have been flattened.
Would have been gone.
I didn't think it was going to be that bad. I really didn't. I underestimated it.
See where the water level line was? It was all in the garage, and of course everything floated.
My apartment complex is in the Gulf.
Looks like a battle zone.
Yeah.
People here have run out of everything. There's still no power. Not long after sunrise, it's already in the 90s. It's starting to smell fetid.
Man, you're a godsend.
Hey, hope it helps.
Oh, man.
Every little, eh?
Thank you, man.
I guess you could call Paul and Eddie lucky. Many were not, at least 30 killed when their apartment block collapsed. Even those already at peace weren't spared.
What you can see about 2 miles in the distance is a floating casino ship. There was another floating casino there. That casino is now here. It's moved 2 miles down the beach, and in doing so, it's completely leveled this hotel. This was a 20-row Holiday Inn, and it's completely gone, bar 3 rows. The power of this thing was just devastating.
Today, the beach and escape route. Casino workers no longer with jobs. Many simply with nowhere to go.
We're from Oregon, California.
And you're going to be coming back here soon?
No.
Probably not in my lifetime.
Probably not in our lifetime.
What is the situation back there?
It's horrible. It's
pretty much houses are gone. People have lost all their stuff.
Total chaos.
Our house was completely covered in mud.
But anybody on the first floor wouldn't have made it.
And neighbors now bonded by more than just proximity.
And when the storm surge would take it up, then after a little bit it would come down. And then it would rise again, and each time it came in, it got higher and higher. And it was way over our heads. It was probably, what, about 12 feet?
The first floor was completely covered, windows and all.
Yeah.
The beachfront, a wretched reminder, this is all that's left.
Joe Contreras of Newsweek magazine has been driving from the Baton Rouge area toward New Orleans all day today. He spoke by phone with Ray Suarez a short time ago.
Joe Contreras, welcome. Why is it so hard to get back into New Orleans?
Since the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Katrina on Monday morning, law enforcement authorities have been sharply restricting access to the New Orleans metropolitan area, and in particular, the center city. All major access routes have been blocked, and because of the unique topography and geography of New Orleans, there are very, very few access roads under normal circumstances. I just got turned back about maybe 5 miles outside the outskirts of the city, and essentially law enforcement authorities want to keep a very, very close control on the number of people entering the city in view of the deteriorating security situation on the streets of New Orleans.
Well, you're finding it hard to get back in. Are people still pouring out of the area?
I have not seen a lot of vehicles streaming westbound out of the city today. I think that there are some people who remained in the city who are being bussed out, but by no means is it an exodus at this point. I suppose in view of the very restricted supply of available vehicles for transporting people out of the stricken area.
You had tried to get on a boat, didn't you? What came of that?
I've been trying to organize maritime transport for the last 36 hours and have yet to find either a boat owner willing to brave the security situation in the city or willing to risk having his vessel possibly damaged by overturned trees floating in the water, pieces of metal debris floating in the water. So yes, that has proven to be a dead end.
It's estimated 4 million people are without electricity in the areas affected by Hurricane Katrina. As a practical matter, what has that meant to daily life in southern Louisiana?
Well, it's meant, for example, that no one can get gasoline in large stretches of that portion of the state. I'm at a gasoline station near a rural area called La Place, and I just heard a refugee complaining to a friend of hers on this very payphone that they are stuck. They have only a quarter tank of gas. They can't get back into their home. They're being told by authorities to go to Tennessee. They don't have enough fuel in their tanks to get much past the border with Mississippi. In Baton Rouge, the state capital, which really emerged only with cuts and bruises, relatively speaking, from Hurricane Katrina, in a very, very upmarket suburb with a family, and we all just sweated out the brutal humidity of a Louisiana summer.
Now, I noted you used the word refugee. Now, you're someone who, across your career, has covered a lot of calamities in Central and South America. Is this a word that you use with care in this situation?
I do use it with care, but I think it is apposite because the term evacuee does not quite capture the full human drama and suffering that people in this part of the country are enduring. As I said to your colleague Neil Conan yesterday, the images that I've seen, the motels and hotels of East Texas and southern Louisiana packed with people from all walks of life, brought to mind images of Parisians fleeing the French capital as the Nazis advanced in May of 1940. It brought to mind scenes that I have witnessed in El Salvador, in Angola, in Mozambique, in Nicaragua, of people who are displaced. But in those cases, they had their worlds turned upside down by military conflict as opposed to natural disaster. I covered the Mexico City earthquake in 1985 that killed 20,000 people, and I never witnessed anything like the drama, the human suffering, and the sheer quantity of people whose lives have been turned upside down by a natural catastrophe as what I have witnessed in the last 36 hours.
What have people been telling you about what's happening to them, what they're going through?
Well, frankly, they're saying that life as they knew it will never exist again for a very, very long time. I heard the president of the New Orleans City Council, Oliver Thomas, saying earlier today that there's so much water in the city that it should be rechristened Lake New Orleans. He said that he remembers how the Twin Towers at the foot of Manhattan were renamed Ground Zero, and to him, New Orleans should be called Lake Zero. This is a city that will require decades to rebuild, reconstruct, and many people are frankly walking around like zombies, like people out of a horror movie, because of the dimensions of the biblical scale of the disaster that has happened to their lives.
Joe Contreras from Newsweek, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
As the frustrations have grown in New Orleans and the surrounding area today, government relief efforts have been criticized by some local residents. A short time ago, Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco responded to those criticisms and spoke about her own frustrations.
You need to understand that we are working in what is essentially a primitive site condition. These conditions make it extremely impossible to do everything that is absolutely essential to be done simultaneously. So we have deployed our people in a prioritized fashion, and our goal is to save as many lives as possible. We begged all of those people, the mayor begged the people, the parish presidents begged people to get out. The people chose to stay in some cases, and in other cases had limited resources. But they were given, even those with limited resources were given opportunities, and perhaps the communications network did not filter rapidly enough. We were working on a very short timeline when that hurricane turned its firepower on Louisiana. We acted as rapidly as humanly possible, and we got out over 1 million people out of that region. Now, you know, we have limited resources. No state, no region is prepared for the dimensions that we have dealt with. But I will tell you something, we have heroes a minute in this operation. We have people who have extended themselves in such a dramatic fashion. You know, you'll have plenty stories to write about our heroes, but I do want to tell you, what angers me the most is that usually disasters like this bring out the best in everybody, and that's what we expected to see. And now we've got people that is bringing out the worst in. And we're going to restore law and order. We are not going to put up with the kinds of things that we have heard. We're not going to put up with petty criminals or hardened criminals doing their business. This is not a time or a place for any of that behavior, and I am just furious. This is intolerant. Louisiana people are too good. They're too strong. They're too wonderful. They're too noble for our reputation to be destroyed by this criminal element that is just making us have to turn essential people over to taking them off the streets. And we will take them off the streets, and they will be dealt with appropriately. Now, you know, this is massive. I think that anybody who's seen it firsthand knows that the logistics are impossible. The Red Cross cannot set up in that disaster area. All people have to come out to get the kind of help that is necessary. There's no place to function there, or function in a rational, civilized fashion. And as we eliminate the water from the streets and from the houses, people will be able to go back in. We will be able to actually assess the situation. We know that there are people trapped in their attics. We're trying to get those out. The ones who are alive are being removed right now. The ones who didn't make it, we don't even know where they are. We don't know which houses had people and which didn't. Certainly a lot of people are calling in knowing that their relatives were in certain houses. We've got addresses, but I will tell you, addresses mean nothing right now because street signs are underwater in so many places. You know, so you have to have a coordinated effort. You have to have some people who know the area, who do it systematically, who pick up people as they come upon them.
Now, Gwen Eiffel looks specifically at what happened to New Orleans' levee system.
It is now nearly impossible to tell where Lake Pontchartrain ends and the city of New Orleans begins. The Crescent City, wedged at the mouth of the Mississippi River below sea level, has finally lost its century-long battle against the waters which surround it. Cascades are rushing in through two large breaches in the wall of levees designed to keep the combined waters of the river, the Gulf, and the lake at bay.
There is no delineation between the river and this neighborhood. It looks like the neighborhood was built in the Mississippi River.
Mayor Ray Nagin told ABC this morning the situation is dire.
So what's happening right now is the bowl effect that everybody talked about is happening as we speak, and the water will rise to try and equal the water level of the lake, which is 3 feet above sea level. And that's significant because on St. Charles Avenue, one of our most famous avenues, it's 6 feet below sea level in elevation. So there will be 9 feet in that area and probably 20 feet in other areas of the city.
The levees are a principal component in a line of defenses erected over the years to protect New Orleans. They act like the walls of a fortress. On the city's southern edge, they keep the Mississippi River penned in. And on the city's northern border, they keep the 600 square miles of Lake Pontchartrain at bay. In the east, the levee has breached along the Industrial Canal, which connects the lake to the river. A large swath of East New Orleans is under deep water as a result. On the north side of town, a 150-yard section of the 17th Street Canal has been decimated. The results? Simply disastrous. As this cross-section of the city shows, nearly the entire city is below sea, river, or lake level. There is nowhere for the water to go once it invades. Ordinarily, a vast network of giant pumps moves water through and out of the city, but the rising tide has knocked out many of those pumps. The Army Corps of Engineers built or fortified much of the present system. This afternoon, Louisiana emergency management officials outlined efforts to plug the levees with giant sandbags.
There are 3,000-pound sandbags that have gone, some have gone in, okay? We've got another 100 that are ready to go into the hole as soon as the slings arrive on location. We have 20,000-pound sandbags that are going to be filled and ready for drop into the hole sometime later today and tonight.
Once the levees are repaired, it could take up to a month to pump out the contaminated waters now inundating New Orleans. For more now on the design of the levees and the difficulties ahead, I'm joined by John Rennie, the editor of Scientific American magazine. John Rennie, many of us are hearing about what these levees are and what they do for the first time. In the case of New Orleans, a very unique case, what is it that this set of levees were supposed to do and how were they breached?
Well, really, the levees were basically constructed to make it possible for there to be a city of New Orleans. New Orleans is built basically in a bowl beside Lake Pontchartrain. And if the levees weren't there, there wouldn't be enough dry land for you to be able to build a city on. In this case, unfortunately, what happened was that the surge of water associated with Hurricane Katrina moved through the lake, struck the levees, and opened up these holes in a few places, allowing the waters from the lake to then start to flow down into the city.
These levees were built to withstand a hurricane of this magnitude? Obviously not, but what was the idea about what they would be able to withstand?
New Orleans has been hit by a lot of hurricanes over the years, and the levees really are constructed so that they can withstand a lot of the sorts of pressures and strains associated with typical hurricanes. The fact is that even if Katrina had really hit New Orleans dead on, and if we'd seen the kind of 25-foot surge that was associated with other parts of it in the worst part of the storm, if that had hit New Orleans, even if the levees had held up, an enormous amount of water would have still spilled over them and flooded the city. So really nothing is built to withstand something the strength of Katrina. But the fact is that in practice, New Orleans didn't have to experience that extraordinary level of force. It was still enough, though, to break open these areas of the levees.
Now, there are also canals, and there's a pump system. Does the pump system kick into gear at a time when the levees fail?
That's right. There's automatically these pumps are supposed to start pumping water back over into the areas in the lake to help keep the city dry. And they're normally designed, I think, to be able to handle, for example, in heavy rains, something on the order of an inch of water an hour arriving. However, they do break down, and a lot more water was coming in a lot faster than that this time.
Was there anything avoidable in this circumstance, or was this a catastrophe waiting to happen?
Unfortunately, this really was a catastrophe that was waiting to happen by almost every measure. Back in 2001, Scientific American published an article on this subject. Because the levees themselves needed a lot of work, it was obvious that eventually some sort of disaster could occur, but also the lands involving the marshy lands surrounding New Orleans have also degraded so fast that they're a kind of natural buffer that would usually help to protect the city against some sorts of New Orleans, and in fact have done that in the past. But they're disappearing very, very fast, and unfortunately, with every year they leave the city more and more exposed to the raw power of the ocean and hurricanes like this.
I read in that Scientific American article that you mentioned that the city was actually losing an acre every 20, or the area every 24 minutes, an acre of wetland was going away. So what is it?
That's right.
So what is it that the city, the state, the government could have been doing to shore up these levees and this system, this irrigation system, as it were, against this sort of catastrophe?
Well, it is a tricky problem. In fact, since 1995, the Army Corps of Engineers has been involved in a project of trying to fortify the levees and modernize the pumping systems. Unfortunately, in the last few years, some of the spending on that actually had fallen off what was recommended, and I'm sure that's going to be controversial as people are looking who to blame. Beyond that, though, really the biggest problem is that it calls for a lot of commitment to look at these areas outside of the city proper and start to try to allow those wetlands to be reconstructed. And that's an expensive project. It's something that goes against the natural development interests, and you know, unfortunately, it would have been expensive, but it would have been a lot less expensive than what we're looking at having to do in New Orleans now.
Assuming that they find a way to plug these holes in the dike, as it were, how long would it take for the city, this bowl, to drain?
It's a very good question. I'm seeing different estimates of that. One estimate I saw said that once they can close that up, assuming that the levels of the water don't rise a lot higher, maybe in a month, maybe more, they would be able to pump that back out, which is actually an astonishing feat. But at this point, I think people are still coming to grips with just how bad the problem is, and no one really knows how hard it's going to be to fix.
And how do they plug it up? I mean, plug it up makes it sound simpler than it probably is.
Well, it is, although fundamentally that's basically the problem. You have this rupture in the levee, and it's a big hole in the dam, in effect, and the water is spilling through. They've already tried to do things like drop big sandbags down into that to fill it up, and that hasn't worked so far. This is kind of an engineering nightmare because it's very hard for the engineers to get access to these points where they have to try to build these patches. And the problem is that even when they start to build these patches, the more of the hole they fill, the faster the water that's coming through the remaining open part. So it keeps tearing away at the surface. It's very, very hard. They're not even sure how big the ruptures in some parts of the levee are. I've seen estimates of 300 yards, but I've also seen estimates of 500 yards and maybe growing.
So now that the water has stopped rising, which they say has happened, now what? Do you just wait for it to go down some more, or they just keep dropping sandbags until you hope it stops?
Well, you have to keep on throwing down those sandbags, and then you have to start the pumping, and it's going to be very, very difficult. Unfortunately, you can't wait for gravity to take the water away because, again, New Orleans itself it's built under the sea level. So naturally, water wants to cover New Orleans to a depth of, in some places, 20 feet.
John Rennie, a tough problem. Thanks a lot for helping us with it.
Thank you.
Now, Jeffrey Brown explores what the hurricane's done to U.S. oil production and supplies.
Our citizens must understand the storm has disrupted the capacity to make gasoline and distribute gasoline. That from President Bush a short time ago, assessing the damage from Hurricane Katrina. Today, the president announced a decision to release oil from the nation's Strategic Petroleum Reserve to keep refineries supplied. The reserve consists of some 700 million barrels of crude oil stockpiled underground in Texas and Louisiana. Joining me to discuss the situation is Red Cavaney, president of the American Petroleum Institute and Industry Trade Group. And welcome to you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Why don't we start by describing the range of facilities in the area that have been affected?
They're quite significant. Maybe to help you understand, 25% of the total domestic production of crude oil comes out of that Gulf region, and about a little more than 20% of the natural gas. So it's very, very significant. Out in the Gulf itself, there are about 6,500 production facilities. And on the ground, there are a large number of refineries, pipeline distribution systems, and everything. It's the most complex infrastructure that we have. And so when we talk about damage in an area of that scale, it's going to affect not just that region, but of course the areas for which they distribute their product, which is basically from the Midwest, everything east.
Is it possible to know how many of these facilities have been damaged yet?
Well, right now when you look at the offshore rigs, there are basically rigs that are close inshore that try and bring the oil and the gas out, and about 23 of those, principally older ones, were destroyed. When you look at the more sophisticated drilling rigs that are out there, 4 in the shallower water and 4 out in the deep water. The deep water is important because that's where the really big volumes are and the big investment. And so there are 8 of those that have been damaged, and we don't have a full assessment on how quickly they can be brought on stream. Of our refineries, however, in the area, we know that there are 9 that are out of commission at present for various reasons, and some of them have not even been able to be visited yet. So it's very hard to say exactly what kind of timetable those refiners can be brought back on stream.
Now we know about the flooding damage, a problem, of course. There's also the power problem.
Yeah, and the problem is you can't deal with both of these at the same time. You have to go in sequence, because if you have refineries that are flooded, you've got to get all the water out before you're going to put electricity in there. And then after you put electricity in, what you need to do is you actually need to try and start up and run tests on your refinery to see whether or not it can be run safely. And only then can you bring it up and start to create some actual production. So we have to rely very much on the local community and the first responders to help us get the water out, and then of course the utility industry, which has been just terrific in terms of getting people from all over the country down there to help.
Now the president's announcement today about releasing some of the oil from the petroleum reserve, what does that mean exactly, and how might that help?
That's a big asset, because one of the things that also has been affected by this are the pipelines, and most of the crude oil and the gasoline, the diesel that travels around our country moves in pipelines. Well, with no electricity, you can't have any pipelines running. So we did have, just outside this critical area where we have the 9 refineries that are basically out of operation for the moment, we have some refineries that exist, but their concern was, how am I going to get crude oil there? And the normal channels weren't able to do that. So by accessing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, those people are going to be able to know that they're going to have crude oil product to convert to gasoline and other things, and so they'll keep going and they'll run very, very efficient. Without the Strategic Petroleum Reserve release, they would have been concerned that they would run out of the raw material, crude oil, and therefore would have to shut down, and we'd be even in a bigger problem. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is very important.
Now, how big a difference does it make, and how quickly does it get into these refineries?
They can literally, because they're located in that particular area, within a matter of a day to a day and a half, from when they decide to make that first release, it actually becomes of use. But it's also a psychological thing. Knowing that it's going to be coming in very short order allows you then to take more confidence that you can run your existing inventory full rather than sort of backing off a little bit. It also helps those refineries that are down that may have said, well, we can get our refinery up, but we can't do much if we can't get crude oil. Now they know with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve there, they have a backup plan, and they can have some good confidence that they can get the machinery running, get the refinery up and going, the crude oil will be there.
I see. But to be clear, for the moment, this is just to help refineries that are up and running. This obviously has no impact on the ones, the 8 or 9 that are down.
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, the President also instructed the EPA to relax some Clean Air Act provisions about the production of oil. What does that do?
Well, it helps you because right now, even before we had the hurricane, we had a circumstance where we were in the prime driving season, and the fact that prices were where they were was the law of supply and demand. There was as much demand as there was supply, and so therefore everybody was bidding up the price of the product. And
in fact, excuse me, but in fact most of our discussions about this of recent weeks and months has been about the demand problem.
Exactly, demand driven, and now we have a situation where you have a supply is driving this particular equation. So the circumstance that people need to be concerned about was if special blends, the government sort of tells us what kind of blends can go in what part of the country. That's part of the rules, the way we have to distribute them. But if we can't make certain blends, that means we can't deliver product to an area that requires another blend without a waiver. So by giving a waiver, it basically says we can get gasoline to wherever it's needed, and in the near term, between now and September 15th, we don't have to be concerned about the effects of these various regulations. So it's very helpful, makes us more flexible, allows us to move that around to where it's needed, and I think ultimately will allow us to bring in some imports we might not otherwise be able to do.
In the immediate term, the impact on most citizens will be at the gas pump?
Yes, they will see more opportunity for supply with this kind of flexibility than we would have otherwise had.
And why does it hit so quickly? People wonder how that works. Why is it overnight that prices rise so high?
Well, what happens is there are about 160,000 retail outlets where the consumer actually buys their gasoline and diesel. About a little less than 10% are owned and operated by the industry itself, the refiners and the people that produce it. The rest are small businessmen and women, small companies, that they own those things. And it's a very competitive marketplace because I don't think there's any other industry that actually posts its price for everybody to see every time they go by. And so what you see is the dynamic move of people trying to decide that I want to steal some customers away from my competitors, so I'm going to lower my price by 2 cents, or somebody else saying, look, I think I can make more money by holding my price with fewer customers. And so those are the kind of decisions that ultimately drive the market.
Right now people are seeing it go up, though.
People are seeing it because the problem with the commodity is if that's the product you're giving to consumers, you don't want to be caught without it. So you'll pay almost anything to get that last truckload to be able to take care of your customers.
Okay, Red Cavany, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And finally tonight, the stampede in Baghdad that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Shiite pilgrims. Lindsay Hilsum of Independent Television News begins our coverage of that tragedy.
As if there hadn't already been enough grief in this city, enough violence and killing. Shoes on the bridge, left by the hundreds who were crushed or plunged to their deaths this morning. They gathered at dawn, hundreds of thousands of devout Shias commemorating the martyrdom of the 7th Imam, Musa al-Kazim, in 799. He's buried at the shrine in Kazimir, a suburb of Baghdad named after him. Trouble started early when at least 3 mortar bombs were fired into the crowd, leaving telltale fan-shaped impact marks. 7 people were killed, others taken to hospital.
الحقيقة صار الحادث
We rushed to the blast scene. We saw the dead scattered on the ground and the injured were taken to Al Khadamiyah Hospital for treatment. There were more injured children than men and women.
But worse was to come. While some cooled themselves in the Tigris, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims streamed up onto the Aima bridge over the river leading to the shrine. The atmosphere was febrile, everyone aware that any small incident could lead to disaster. A rumor spread. Someone had seen a suicide bomber.
After we arrived at the sacred Khadamiyah area, we heard that there was a suicide car bomber. There were thousands of people on the bridge, and because they were afraid, they began to panic and run. Then they began to trample all over each other.
Total disaster. Some jumped into the river and drowned. Others fell to their deaths onto the concrete approach at the end of the bridge. Still more were suffocated in the crush.
I tried to help women, children and old men. When I lifted them up, their lips were blue and their ears were bleeding. Their noses were dripping blood. Each person was lying on top of another, tangled up together.
The shoes tell the story. Thousands abandoned in panic by victims and survivors alike. Testament to a catastrophe even more deadly than the daily bombings in Baghdad.
Terrence Smith spoke by phone a short time ago with Los Angeles Times reporter Borzu Dergahi in Baghdad.
Borzu Dergahi, welcome to the broadcast. I understand that you got to this area not long after the stampede occurred. Tell us what you saw.
Well, it was still a lot of very, very skittish and nervous pilgrims, as well as a lot of police and Iraqi soldiers firing their weapons into the air, trying to sort of maintain crowd control. There was a lot of very, very upset people, very sad people. People would gasp as they walked by a pile, really a mound of plastic slippers that apparently belonged to those killed and injured in the incident. There was a bunch of politicians, including Ahmad Chalabi, who came to the scene with their security entourages and were sort of surveying the area.
So I take it that even in Baghdad, where you've had and seen so much violence, this was a shocking event.
You know, this was just really awful. I mean, one of the things that keeps staying in my mind is those piles of plastic slippers, and just sort of looking at them, you could tell by looking at them what kind of people were in this incident, were killed and injured in this incident, and they were just very poor people. You know, very, very small people, very like elderly and young and women, and people who were too poor to afford shoes.
Now, I understand that some Iraqi officials have charged that this story that there was a suicide bomber in the midst, that this whole thing was, in their words, a deliberate act of terrorism, and yet other officials, Sunni officials, deny that. Is there any evidence one way or the other?
There's no evidence one way or the other. There's as many stories as there are victims that we spoke to today, and we haven't been able to nail down anything. I will say that most of the military officials and security officials that I spoke to on the scene conceded that their security precautions played a big role in exacerbating the problems here. The concrete I spoke to several high-level military officials who were saying that, you know, we had ordered these concrete barriers that were in the middle of this bridge to be removed. That, you know, we could foresee this trouble. That these concrete barriers that were there to prevent the vehicles from traveling back and forth between Sunni Adamiyah and Shiite Khadamiyah would create problems for pedestrians, that this bridge was not ready for pedestrians. For some reason, these concrete barriers were not removed.
So is it clear then, or is it believed, that this was a deliberate effort to set one community against the other, or is it still too much confusion to know?
It's absolutely impossible to know, and I think that, you know, it's good to be cautious in this arena. You know, like traditionally, the residents of Adamiyah, which is the Sunni Arab neighborhood right across the river from Khadamiyah, are known for giving water and refreshments and sweets to the pilgrims that walk across. And today there was a police trucks going around saying, you know, don't drink the water, it's poison. And, there was these rumors going around that the Sunnis were trying to poison the Shiites, and we could find no real evidence of that. And even today, even amidst this chaos and amidst all of this tension, we found Sunni Arab people who helped the victims and took them to the hospitals. So it's not clear that sectarianism drove this event.
What was the reaction? What has been the reaction among the people of Baghdad?
Well, I can say that a large number of the victims were from Sadr City, and tonight Sadr City is a scene of utter mourning and grief as people set up funeral tents and get bodies prepared for burial down in the Shiite shrine city of Najaf tomorrow. People are very angry there and very upset. Sadr City, as some viewers may know, is a vast Shiite slum in East Baghdad, and these are people who are lacking services. They don't get much water. They don't get any sewage. They don't have electricity, and this just adds to their misery.
Adds to the tension as well, I suppose, between the two communities, just at a point when the country's trying to move towards a constitution.
That may be, but at this point it's also sort of creating problems for the government. And it could very well be that it was more a matter of municipal mismanagement that caused this. It remains to be investigated, but it seems like the crowd control strategy that they employed here, knowing full well that there would be 1 million pilgrims, could have been probably better handled. There were less pilgrims, many were saying, this year than last year. So, they should have known that there would have been this many pilgrims, Iraqis say. And the people that I spoke to at the scene, quite frankly, they blamed Ibrahim Jafari's government, Prime Minister's government, for the handling of this rather than... I didn't hear any sectarian slogans.
And finally, I understand that there are some, 3 days of mourning, national mourning, that has been declared?
Yeah, the Ibrahim Jafari, the Prime Minister, has declared a state of mourning. It should be said also that the United States government has expressed its condolences and offered to help in any way it can by releasing a statement from Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad.
Borzu Dargahi, thank you very much for filling us in.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And again, the major developments on the hurricane. The mayor of New Orleans said Katrina killed hundreds of people, possibly thousands. Water stopped pouring through breached levees, but most of the city was still flooded. Officials in Mississippi reported at least 110 people killed there. President Bush said the recovery could take years, but he said the Gulf Coast and New Orleans will come back. And late today, in an unrelated story, federal authorities announced terror indictments in Los Angeles. 4 people allegedly plotted to attack National Guard